She was quietly seated in first class when two security guards walked in and told her to get up. Cameras rolled as stunned passengers watched her get escorted out, despite having a valid ticket. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The air in the cabin turned brittle the moment the flight attendant's voice sliced through the quiet. Vanessa looked up slowly, still holding the hardcover in her lap, her thumb saving her place somewhere deep into the final act. The woman in uniform didn't blink. Her tone was rehearsed, coldly professional, but her eyes flicked with something else. Disbelief? Irritation? Contempt wrapped in politeness? Vanessa had seen that look before, in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in elevators where no one expected her to be the one giving orders. She gave the boarding pass without hesitation, her brow raised only slightly. "Is there a problem?" she asked. No answer. Just a pause. The attendant studied the ticket for an awkward beat longer than necessary, then forced a tight-lipped smile and vanished up the aisle. Vanessa exhaled slowly, glancing at the other passengers. No one said a word, but she felt their eyes skimming across her skin like cold fingers. It wasn't even 2 minutes before she heard the footsteps. 2 uniformed security officers boarded, walked directly to her seat, and stood over her like bouncers outside a club. One was already speaking into a shoulder radio. "She's refusing to move." Vanessa's heart dropped, not from fear, but from a sudden icy recognition. This isn't a mistake. She wasn't being questioned. She was being removed. She looked up. "I haven't refused anything," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is my seat. I have the boarding pass, and I'd like to know why." "We need you to come with us, ma'am." "On what grounds?" "Ma'am, please don't make this harder." Harder? She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't resisted. And yet they reached for her arm. Passengers watched without a sound. Someone across the aisle pulled out a phone and started recording. Another leaned in to whisper to his wife, who clutched her pearls and shook her head. To them, she was already a disruption, a threat, an anomaly in a space reserved for people who belonged. Her heels clicked hollowly on the jet bridge floor as they led her out, her chin held high, dignity intact but blood roaring in her ears. She had been erased in real time, in public, and no one had lifted a finger. No accusation, no crime, no explanation, just 2 facts, her skin and her seat. Vanessa sat motionless in gate 47B, the low murmur of terminal noise buzzing around her like static. The sharp edges of humiliation hadn't dulled, they'd only shifted inward, compressing into a weight lodged beneath her ribs. The same mouth that had once argued before Supreme Court justices now trembled in silence. Her suit, tailored and crisp when she left home, now felt like armor cracked open. No one had asked what happened. No supervisor had approached her. No apologies. Just the unmistakable echo of being treated like a trespasser in a world she'd more than earned her way into. Across the concourse, a child cried. A coffee cart hissed. Life moved on, indifferent to what had just unraveled. But Vanessa couldn't move. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the seat beside her, lighting up with news alerts, emails, a call from her firm's managing partner. She ignored them all. When she finally called customer service, she used the same steady voice she reserved for court filings. After nearly an hour on hold, looped music grinding in her ear like an insult, a woman answered, polite, distant, uninformed. She asked for Vanessa's confirmation number and read from a script about unforeseen security situations and operational discretion. Vanessa interrupted softly. "I was removed from my seat because someone thought I didn't belong there." There was a pause, a long one. Then came the offer, a $200 voucher, good for domestic travel. Vanessa blinked slowly. "Thank you," she said, voice taut with restraint. "But I'll handle this another way." Back home, her assistant, Eric, had already seen the video. He sent her a link with the subject line, It's everywhere. She tapped it open. Grainy footage taken from across the aisle. Her face calm, security looming, the steady sound of her heels against the carpet. The clip had gone viral under the hashtag First Class While Black. There were thousands of comments, some from people enraged, others from those simply numb. One woman wrote, "This happened to my father in 1996. Nothing's changed." A college student, "I don't fly anymore. Can't deal with being treated like a suspect just for existing." Vanessa scrolled, absorbing every word, not with hunger but with gravity. She wasn't alone. But that made it worse. This wasn't an isolated wound. It was part of a body, a pattern, and that meant someone needed to answer for it. Vanessa had always believed that the courtroom wasn't the only place justice could be served. It was simply where it was recorded. Real justice began in the moment someone stood up and said, "No more." And as she sat in her home office, phone pressed to her ear, files open across her desk, she felt that fire reignite, not fueled by rage but by precision, calculated, deliberate, controlled. She was no ordinary passenger, and the airline had unknowingly tangled with the worst possible outcome for a careless institution, a woman with credentials, a platform, and a memory like a steel trap. Her degrees hung behind her, Harvard Law, Columbia undergrad, not as decorations but as tools. Tools she was now sharpening. She reached out to former colleagues from the Civil Liberties Union. A few owed her favors. Others joined because they'd seen the footage and felt the sting in their own bones. Within 72 hours, a legal war room had formed across 3 time zones. Vanessa coordinated Zoom calls with digital strategists, filed the initial DOT complaint, and connected with advocacy groups with deep influence in policy circles. Every move was strategic, not spiteful. This was not vengeance. This was infrastructure being built for a reckoning. Then came the messages, quiet, private, confessional. The first came late at night, her inbox pinging just after midnight. "I used to work for that airline. We were trained to keep the cabin looking premium." That was code. Another followed the next day. "They won't say it outright, but there's a checklist. People who don't fit the profile get double-checked. I always hated it." Vanessa read each note slowly, her hands trembling, not from sadness, but from clarity. This wasn't about her being disrespected. This wasn't even about that single flight. This was about every gate agent who made a face when a black woman boarded first. Every flight attendant who reached for the ID of someone who had already been scanned in. She was no longer the protagonist of a one-off viral moment. She was stepping into a larger role, one she'd unknowingly been preparing for her entire career. Hope didn't come from the apology she never received. It came from knowing, for the first time, that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was building a case for all the passengers they had quietly erased. The morning the story broke nationwide, Vanessa stood by her window, phone in hand, watching a cold drizzle streak down the glass. Her name, once confined to legal filings and courtroom transcripts, now glowed in bold serif across the front page of the Washington Post. Civil rights attorney files class action suit against Atria Airlines. Dozens join alleging discrimination. Beneath the headline was a still frame from the video, her face dignified and steady as security loomed behind her. Her inbox was chaos, but not the empty noise of outrage. These were letters of lived pain, personal, professional, suffocating. One came from a pediatric surgeon denied boarding after questioning why his seat had been reassigned. Another from a corporate vice president who was randomly checked every time he flew first class. Each message added weight to the case and depth to the wound. Vanessa read every one. Within days, the lawsuit had grown beyond a single plaintiff, a chorus of professionals, Black, Latino, South Asian, stepped forward with names, dates, seat numbers, and receipts. Vanessa and her team compiled everything with clinical precision. The lawsuit wasn't just about discrimination anymore. It was about pattern and practice, the gold standard for exposing systemic misconduct. Then, the leak surfaced. An anonymous employee, verified and vetted, forwarded a company-wide memo issued 6 months prior. The subject line was innocuous, cabin presentation protocol. But buried deep in the language was a line that detonated across the internet. Ensure that passengers in premium seating match the expected profile of our brand. Below it, when in doubt, verify quietly. We want to maintain aesthetic standards. Legal vagueness couldn't mask its intent. It didn't have to mention race. Everyone understood exactly who didn't match. Within hours, #expected-profile trended worldwide. The fallout was swift. Atria Airline's CEO appeared on CNN in a hastily arranged interview, posture rigid, voice quivering with rehearsed remorse. "We deeply regret the experiences some of our passengers have faced. We are reviewing internal policies." But the apology rang hollow. Vanessa knew it. The world knew it. The damage wasn't just emotional, it was financial. Investors panicked. Journalists dug deeper. The story dominated the news cycle for 48 hours straight. Vanessa didn't gloat. There was no room for smugness. Triumph didn't look like a fist in the air. It looked like evidence. Documentation. Witnesses. The record corrected. This wasn't the end of something. It was the moment accountability began. The ripple wasn't just economic. It was cultural. Within 36 hours, Atria Airlines' market value plunged by over $4.2 billion. Their stock bled red across financial news tickers, investor confidence cratered, and what began as a single act of institutional arrogance transformed into a seismic public reckoning. Sponsorship deals vanished overnight. A global cosmetics brand suspended their travel partnership. An international sports team quietly announced they'd switch carriers. The message was unmistakable. Aligning with Atria had become radioactive. Behind closed doors, boardroom chaos reigned. 3 directors submitted early resignations, citing philosophical misalignment. Internal emails, leaked and scrutinized, revealed a frantic scramble for consultants, crisis managers, and DEI trainers they should have hired a decade earlier. But the public wasn't interested in quick-fix seminars or glossy apologies. They wanted substance, change, and at the center of it all stood Vanessa Cole. She never intended to become a symbol, but symbols don't ask for the spotlight. They're cast into it. A week after the lawsuit was filed, Vanessa sat across from a seasoned anchor on a national morning show. Polished, poised, but no longer quiet. When asked why she didn't just take the $200 voucher and move on, her answer echoed across the country. Because silence buys comfort at the cost of progress. I've worked too hard to be treated like I don't belong. That line trended for days. It was printed on protest signs at airports, painted on murals, quoted in op-eds. Teachers used her story to teach civil rights history. Law students cited the case in mock trial. Children looked up and saw someone who refused to shrink. She was dubbed the Rosa Parks of the Sky, a title she accepted with humility but redirected. "This fight started long before me," she told a reporter. "I'm just one voice, but I plan to make it count." The movement that emerged wasn't just about airplanes. It was about dignity in public spaces, about earned access being respected, about systemic bias being confronted without apology. Advocacy groups launched initiatives to collect travel discrimination stories. Airlines across the country began quietly reviewing their own internal codes and cabin policies. Even competitors of Atria released public statements, not to distance themselves from scandal, but to align with the values Vanessa now represented. It was more than vindication, it was transformation. Vanessa hadn't just reclaimed her seat, she made space for thousands of others who'd been pushed out of theirs and taught them how to take it back. The betrayal wasn't loud, it didn't scream. It whispered, it crept. It wore a smile and a badge that was no longer his to wear. The man Kevin remembered, the one who offered him water from a dented canteen and warned him about sudden elevation drops, wasn't some kind stranger. He was Dale Cooper, a former park ranger discharged 2 years earlier for what his official file dryly referred to as psychological instability. The file didn't mention the incidents, those were buried deeper, sealed in internal memos and quietly shuffled out of the chain of command. No one had thought to flag him when he kept showing up at the trailheads. He had the look, sun-leathered skin, authoritative gait, old boots broken in by 1,000 miles of forest floor. He passed, not because he was convincing, but because no one ever really looked. For 2 years, he blended in, haunted the perimeters of the national forest like a ghost with keys to the gates. He didn't ask hikers to trust him. He simply looked the part. And that was enough. The manhunt took 3 days. Authorities combed the ridge lines with dogs, drones, and heat sensors. Volunteers were kept out. Warnings were issued. The forest, once a sanctuary, now breathed with suspicion. On the 3rd morning, a tactical unit found it, a cabin nestled in a bowl of shadow, tucked beneath a natural overhang and nearly invisible unless you were standing right above it. The door was locked, the windows blacked out with duct tape, the chimney cold. Inside, the smell hit first, damp, earthy, metallic. The kind of smell that lingered in your hair even after a shower. There were no signs of struggle, just an eerie stillness, like the place had been holding its breath. Then they saw the wall. Pinned across it were laminated trail maps, each marked with colored pushpins and numbers scrawled in thick pencil. Nearby, a table. On it, ID tags. Hiking boots in pairs, arranged almost ceremonially, some still caked with dried mud. A weathered notebook sat at the edge, its pages stiff with age. They opened it. Inside were names, dates, handwritten notes on solo hikers, observations, patterns. Some names were crossed out, others circled, and in between, drawings, distorted sketches of paths through the woods, some real, others invented, leading nowhere but ending in red X's. This wasn't just a man pretending to be someone he once was. It was someone who had taken the authority that came with trust and used it to hunt.